Last time that we got together, we looked at different forms of what we call central tendency. We looked at mean, median, and mode. And to some extent, we're going to be doing that again today, but we're also going to look at something called a weighted average. So partly things we did already, but with a little bit more of a slant to it, right? So I'm going to talk about histograms and I'm going to talk about weighted averages. Let's get started. All right, so let me give you a definition of a histogram. It's a chart. It's a kind of a graph that shows what are called frequencies for intervals of values of some kind of metric. Right? We're measuring something and we're setting it up with these bars. I'm going to show you an example in a minute. And each of these bars is referred to as a bin, and they all have the same width. So here's an example of a histogram, right? We did a survey of the average shoe size of female students in 2 grade 11 classes, and this information is shown in the graph below. I'm going to ask you to find the mean, median, and the mode. But let's just understand what this is really saying. Each of these bars tells you how many people had that particular shoe size. So this is a shoe size of 5. And if you look at this grid, this bar goes up to 6. It means that there were 6 people who had that shoe size. Size 6, also 6 people. But for size 7, we had 11 people who had that shoe size. And you can just keep reading along the graph to see how much of each shoe size they had in these 2 classes of grade 11 students. So 10 had, or size 10 had 3 students. If you just look along the side and read on the y-axis, the vertical axis, you can see how many people had that particular shoe size. So that's what we call a histogram. And like I said, each of these bars, we sometimes refer to them as bins, and they represent that you're measuring something. In this case, it's shoe size. And the y-axis, the vertical axis, is telling you how many of that particular thing you had in your group. Okay, so that's what the table is showing you, or that's what the graph is showing you. Now I'm going to take this graph and I'm going to create what's called a frequency table out of it. And here's what my frequency table looks like. It's the same information from here, but shown in terms of a table. So I'm calling it a frequency table. Now, ignore the cumulative frequency for now. I'll explain what that is in a minute. But it's the same information we just talked about. Shoe size of 5, there were 6 people. Same thing here. Shoe size of 6, there were 6 people. Shoe size of 11, we had 11 people. And so on and so forth, all the way down to size 11, where there was only 1 person. So that's what the frequency table is showing. It's the same information from the histogram shown in table format. Now, let me explain what the cumulative frequency is. Cumulative frequency is just simply adding these numbers as you go down the table. So, for instance, this 12 comes from adding this 6 and this 6. Then you just simply add the next number in the frequency table all the way down. So 12 plus 11 gives us 23. 23 plus 8 gives us 31. 31 plus 2 gives us 33. 33 plus 3 gives you 36. And 36 plus 1 gives you 37. This last number here that you're seeing, cumulative frequency, is actually the total number of people that you had in the first place. If you were to add the 6, the 6, the 11, the 8, the 2, the 3, and the 1, you'd also get 37. But all this cumulative frequency is doing is taking each of these numbers and adding the 1 before it. So 6 plus 6 gives you 12. 11 plus these 2 gives you the 23, and so on, until you've added up all the numbers to give you the last number, which is 37. And I'll explain to you why we do that when we get on to looking at median in a minute. But let's just make sure we understand. All this first part of the table is showing you is what is in this histogram over here. There's nothing new, nothing different. It's the same information from the table. The cumulative frequency column, which I put in, is when you add the numbers in the table as you go down. So you take this plus this first to give you that number. Then you keep adding the next number to give you the next number. Adding the next one to give you the next number. This 2 to the 31 gives you 33. That 3 to the 33 gives you 36. It's called a cumulative frequency. Okay, now let's get to what the question is asking for the mean, the median, and the mode. I'm going to start by asking the easiest one first, the mode. The mode is the most frequent shoe size. So let me throw this out to you. If you looked at this table, either the table or the histogram, and you asked, or I asked you, which shoe size is the most popular shoe size? What would you say that as is the answer to that question? You tell me.
I would say it's size 7.
Absolutely. Because you can just look at the histogram and tell because it's the tallest bar, right? So, or you can look at the table and see which frequency is the biggest number, right? So, if I'm asking for mode, when we were looking for mode in our last class, we were just asking which number occurred the most times. Well, because this is frequency, frequency tell you how many times we got a particular thing. Seven, shoe size of seven, occurred 11 times. No other shoe size occurred as much. So the mode is just simply looking in the frequency table for the biggest number, right? So here's my answer. The mode is 7. As simple as that, right? So if you either look at the histogram, the bar chart, or look at the frequency table, to get the mode, you just simply find the one that has the highest frequency. It is that simple. So that's why the mode is 7. Now, so we've answered the last part first. Let's get to the median now. To get the median, we're looking for the middle value. Remember that from our last class. Which number is in the middle? Well, that's a little hard to know from this. It's not just looking for the bar that's in the middle of the picture. That's not how it's done. The reason why we did the cumulative frequency is because we need to figure out where the middle number is. And to do that, we need to know how many numbers we have. How many people do we have so that if we were to line them up, we could find the person in the middle. Remember, these are 37 people. This number down here tells you how many female students we had in these two grade 11 classes. That's what this last number tells you. And I can get that 37 by adding up all of these frequencies, as I said before, the 6 plus 6 plus 11 plus 8 plus 2 plus 3 plus 1, which you can check for yourself is 37. So which size is in the middle of those 37 female students? Well, go back and remember the stuff we did on our last class where we said if there was an odd number of data that we would add 1 and then divide by 2. So I've done that. 37 female students, I add 1 to that and divide by 2. If you did that on your calculator, that will give you 19. So what I'm looking for is a 19th student. How far into this frequency table do I need to go to get the 19th student? Well, in the first set, right, there's 6 students in the first group, right? Only 6 students. Have I gotten to the 19th student yet? No, right? Let's go a little further into the table. If I get into the second group, how many students do I have so far? I have 12 students so far. Have I reached the 19th student yet? No. I only gotten to the 12th student because I have 6 students in the first group and 6 students in the second group. There was a 19 students somewhere in this group right here. Well, if I add the 11 students in this, I'm going to get to 23, which means I've gone past the 19th student. The 19th student is somewhere inside of this group right here. That's where the 19th student is. And so what I'm asking is, where's the 19th value? Which bin? And I'm pointing to the bin, right? I'm not saying it's the first or the second student in this group, right? It's somewhere inside this group. The 23 students that I have so far, one of them is a 19th student. I got to 12 when I had the first 2 groups, which means I didn't reach 19 yet. I have to keep going and add that 11 and see if somewhere in there is a middle student. And yes, that middle student is in this group. That's why my arrow is pointing to this middle group. So for me to know what the median is, I have to see what the shoe size is where that middle student is. And that is number 7. So 7 is also our median. It's the middle size. And let me just repeat why I'm saying it's the middle size. I need the 19th student to get to the middle side. I added 1 to the total number of students divided by 2. I got 19. You can do that for yourself. And I'm saying that I need to get to where the 19th student is. I only have 6 so far. If I put in the second group, I only have 12 so far. If I put in the third group, I have now 23 so far, and somewhere in there is number 19. And that means that the 19th student has a size 7 shoe. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to move on. So I'm going to do the average now, right? The mean, all right? Let me go back a second here. The question asked for the mean, the median, and the mode. We've got the median, we said was 7. We got the mode. You told me that was 7. So those are two. Both of those are right. But we haven't figured out the mean yet. Now, here's the thing about the mean. I know we have a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, a 9, a 10, and 11. We have all of these shoe sizes here in our group, but there are 6 people with the shoe size of 5, 6 people with a shoe size of 6, 11 people with a shoe size of 7, 8 with a shoe size of 8, 2 with 9, 3 with 10, and 1 with 11. Now, I don't need this cumulative frequency column anymore, but I still have it there for now. But I need to figure out how to find the mean. Now, to get the mean, normally we take all of the numbers that we have and divide by the number of numbers. But remember, I have basically 6 of these 5s. So let me show you how to set this up. I'm going to find the mean by taking 6 times 5, because I have 5 6s. I'm going to say 5 times 6, plus I have 6 of these 6s, so that's 6 times 6. I have 11 of those 7s, so I'm going to take 7 times 11. I have 8 of these 8s, I'm going to take 8 times 8. I have 2 9s, so that's why it's 9 times 2. I have 3 10s, so it's 3 times 10. And I have 1 11. So I'm going to take all of these products, this times this times this. Then I'm going to add them all up. Then I'm going to divide by the sum of all of the people that I have. I have 6 here, 6 here, 11 here, 8 here, 2 here, 3 here, and 1 here. When we do mean or average, we always divide by the number of data points. If you think about it, I really have this many data points, right? 6 people here, 6 more people here, 11 people here, 8 people here, 2 here, 3 here, and 1 here. This number is always going to be the same number as in cumulative frequency, the last number here, which is 37. So I'm going to go ahead now and do the math on this. If you have your calculator, you can do this for yourself. It works out that this is 266 on top over 37 when I added up these numbers. But I already said that these numbers are going to add up to the same 30, because it's really 37 girls that we're talking about between these two classes. So I'm going to take the total number of shoe sizes times the number of shoes. Sorry, total number of people times the shoe size, which I've done up top here. Then I'm going to divide by the number of people by adding all the frequencies together. And it gives me this, 266 over 37. So all I need to do now is actually calculate that. That's approximately, and that's what this sign here means, by the way. It means approximately 7.2. It's not exactly, it's approximately 7.2. So that is our mean. Now, that compares very favorably, if I just go back here for a second, with the mode and the median. In fact, most times, these 3 values are generally very close, right? So the mode is 7, the median is 7, and we just found out that when we did all the work, the mean was 7.2. They're all very, very close, unless the data is what we call skewed. Then all the time you find mean, median, and mode to be roughly the same. So that takes care of that. So that is how that is done, right? You're going to have a homework question on that, which I'll get to a little later on. But let me get to weighted averages. Let's talk about weighted averages. When you have a weighted average, so we just talked about means, which is the same thing as average on Thursday when we last had a class. But we're talking about weighted averages. So let's talk about what that means. When a weighted average is applied to a set of numbers, more importance or weight is placed on some components of the set. Your final average in this class, just so you know, this is real world stuff we're talking now. Your average for this class is an example of a weighted average. Here's a formula for a weighted average. It is the sum of, when you take the number, so let's say you got a number of some number on a test, times the weighting factor. And I will go over weighting factors in a minute. And then you're going to divide all of that by the sum of all of the weights. So this is the general formula that we're going to use to find a weighted average. If you think about what we just did, it was kind of like a weighted average, right? If you consider the frequencies in the previous question as the weights, so there were 6 of those 5 size shoes, 6 of the 6 type shoes, 11 of the 7 shoes. Think of these numbers here as kind of like the weights, right? So this average that we worked out just now is kind of like a weighted average. I'm not going to do it again. I'm just showing you that what we did here is an example of this thing that we're calling a weighted average. So let's now look at 2 grading systems. There are 2 teachers that we're going to compare. You can see one over here, Mr. Tat, and he has a way of breaking down. By the way, we have a breakdown for the weights for this class. And for all my classes, there's always a weighting system. And we can talk about that another time. But if you look at the course outline I gave at the beginning of the year, you will see what the weights are that I give to certain categories. So like tests and quizzes are one weight, homework checks are another weight, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is a weighting system by one teacher, Mr. Tat, and he gives 25% for homework, 10% for class participation. Your average on tests, he gives 40%, and your final exam, he gives 25%. Well, this other person over here, she has a different weighting system. She gives less for homework, the same for class participation. She gives more for the test, right? And she doesn't have as much on the final exam. So this teacher is putting most of her weight on her test average, not on the final. This other teacher over here, he's putting most on the test as well, but he does tend to put not as much on the test because he puts more into the final than Miss etc. does. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to use both of these grading systems for this person's scores. So this person had these averages for homework, class participation, test average, and final exam. We're going to see if this person was in Mr. Tat's class, what would he get or she get? If this person was in Miss etc. Sid's class, what would she get based on this weighting system? Now remember, the formula that we just talked about, and I'll go back and show you what that formula is. It says the number, so like the number they got on in that particular category times the weighting factor divided by the sum of all the weights. So I'm going to take, for Mr. Tat's class, I'm going to take the 25% weight and multiply it by the homework average, because homework is 25%. So take what you got in homework, multiply by the weight, plus 10, because it's 10%, times that grade, so 95, plus 40, which is the weight for that category, times 84, plus 25, which is the weight for that category, times 68. Now, what am I going to divide that by? The sum of the weights. The weights are here, 25 plus 100 plus 40 plus 25. If I add up all of those are the weights. That's how I'm going to get my average. So I did the math ahead of time. I got 8260 when I multiplied all of these things here and added them up. I got 100, all right? It's a percent, so it's really out of 100. And that worked out to 82.6%. So if you had these marks in Mr. Tat's class, then you would have this average. Now, what happens if you were in a different class who had a different set of weights? Well, we're going to do the same thing all over again. We're going to use a different set of weights. So we're going to have the same marks. So it's going to be 90, 95, 84, and 68. But watch what happens. For Miss Etcetra's class, it's 15 times 90. Why? Because the weighting for homework is 15. 10 times 95. Well, he did the same thing over here. So nothing different here. But 60 times 84. Her test mark is weighted way higher than Mr. Tat's test mark. And then final exam is worth less. So do you think he's going to get the same mark here? He or she's going to get the same mark here? No, it's going to be different. It's actually higher. And I can tell you why it's higher. I don't know if you have an idea why it's higher, but I'm going to tell you why it's higher. Over here, not much higher, just a little bit higher, but it is higher because Miss Etc. put a greater weight on the test. Look at the test mark. The test mark was 84% here, right? So that would have made her mark higher than Mr. Tat's class. He puts a lot more weight into the exam. The exam mark wasn't great over here at all, right? She doesn't put as much weight on the exam. And that's why the mark here is higher on her weighting system. Not a big difference, but there's some difference. So when you adjust weights, you can actually change the mark. And I hope you actually know this. This goes for these two people that we're talking about. It also goes for you when I'm working out your mark. Okay, now I'm going to go through an exercise. Hopefully, if you have any questions, by the way, feel free to stop me and ask as we go along, right? That's kind of how this works. I don't have an issue with you asking me to stop and go over anything that we have gone through already. All right. All right. So let me continue here now. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. So use the following information to find your course average in Mr. Tat's class. These are the grades you got for homework. So it's not just, I'm not just giving you the overall mark, I'm giving you all the homework marks that this student got. It's got an 83, a 92, a 95, and a 90. Class participation, 90 and 100. Test grades, got all of these marks right here. And then the final grade, final exam, was 84. So how am I going to put this all together using Mr. Tat's weighting system? Which mark do I use for homework? What mark do I use for class participation? What mark do I use for tests? Because I have to use my weights on all of these. And now the weights are right here. What mark do I use? You have any idea? What mark do you think I should use? For homework, for instance. Do you have any idea what I would do with the homework?
Um, what you would do you're doing before, like, wait, you repeat it again?
Sure. What mark should I use for his homework mark? When you're doing the question before this, let me take you back a little bit here. They gave you the homework averages being 90%. But no, this time, they're just giving you different homework marks, 83, 92, 95, and 90. So which of these should I use? What number should I use for homework? That's the question. What do you think? What do you think might be a good way for me to figure this out?
Put them in from least to greatest.
Mm, yeah, well, that's if you're trying to get like the middle number. But really, what we need to do is try to find the average of the homework marks. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that for all of these categories. I'm going to find the average of his homework mark, which is just a mean, just a straight average, the average of his participation mark, the average of his test mark. But his final exam, that's just one number. So, I don't have to find an average for that. So, I'm going to do what we did in the last class, which is Thursday. I'm going to take the average in each category. So, for homework, I'm going to take 83 plus 92 plus 95 plus 90 divided by 4 because there are 4 homework marks. Okay? So that's all I'm doing. Find the average homework mark. I'm going to use this later on to figure out what this person's final mark is. I'm going to do the same thing for, which works out to be 90, by the way. So 360 divided by 4. We'll do the same thing for class participation. 90 plus 100, but divided by 2 because there are only 2 marks. Do the same thing for the, and that works out to 95. Do the same thing for test grades, right? It's these numbers here, 90 plus 78 plus 84 plus 88 divided by 4 because there are 4 marks. So this one is divided by 4 because there are 4 marks. This one is divided by 2 because there are 2 marks. This one is divided by 4 because there are 4 marks. His final exam grade is only 1 mark, so his average is going to be that 1 mark. We don't have to do anything with that. So let's go ahead and use the weightings now to get his final mark, right? When you put everything together. So we're going to take, oh, by the way, his test grade worked out by an average of 85. We're going to take the 25% weight and multiply it by his homework average, the 10% weight and multiply it by his class participation average, his 40% weight and multiply it by his test grades average, and then his 25% weight and multiply it by his final exam, which is 84. That's what we're told, just 84. We don't have to average that one at all because it was already just 1 mark. So we're going to do the stuff on top, and then we're going to multiply it by the sum of the weights. These weights we already knew, summed up to 100. So here's what this looks like. 8,700 divided by 100, which works out to 87%. So this person's overall grade is going to be 87%, okay, using the weighting average. Now, remember that this weighting that we use for each of these categories could be different, right? And if I work this out in the other lady's class, I forget her name now, then it will be a different weighted average. So your mark can depend on weights, and it actually does, just for the record. All right. The last question I'm going to do with you is this. If Mr. Tats allowed you to retake your final exam, so he said, you know what, I know you want to get 90% on your overall mark. I'm going to let you retake your exam to see if you can get your mark up to 90%. Remember, here's what you're at right now, 87%. You got 84 on your final exam, right? So with a weight of 25%. That's basically where you are. But he's saying to you, okay, I want to give you a chance. I want to see if you can get your mark up to 90%. So I'm going to use a formula to do this. Here's how I'm going to do this. I already know how to find a weighted average, right? It's the same as before. So 25 times, and by the way, 25, let me take you back so you can see where I'm doing this. All of this stuff here is going to be the same except for the 84%. I don't know what that 84% is yet, right? I don't know what this exam mark is yet. The exam mark was 84. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put everything there except the exam mark. I'm just going to put exam for that. I don't know what it is yet. Still divided by the sum of the weights, but now I'm going to set it equal to 90 because what I want the overall mark to be is 90. So my next step is to do the calculation. What's 25 times 90 plus 10 times 95 plus 40 times 85? This part I can't calculate because that's an unknown. So, oh, sorry. Let me keep going here. So this works out to this number plus this number plus this number. That's just multiplying these numbers on top here. Plus 25 times the exam over 100. Adding up these numbers gives me 100. And that's equal to 90. Okay, let's keep doing some algebra now. Let's add up these numbers, right, which works out to be this. Plus 25 times the exam over 100 is equal to 90. Then let's cross multiply. Hopefully remember what cross multiplication is. Multiply the bottom of this side times the top of that side. We're going to do that next. That works out to be 9,000. So 90 times 100 is 9,000. So this plus 25 times that gives me 9,000. So again, I'm solving an equation. So I'm going to go ahead now and try to isolate the exam mark by subtracting 6,600 from this side, right? So that 6,600 that was on this side is subtracted from that side. So 25 times the exam is equal to this. Let's just work that out. Bring it over here. So 25 times the exam is equal to 2,400. So I have one step left. One other step left to get the exam on its own. I need to know what this number is. That's the thing I need to figure out, right? That's the thing. That was the question. It says, what do you have to get on the final exam to make a 90%? So we set it equal to 90 and we followed through on all of the math. And now we're at the point where we say that 25 times whatever this exam is 2,400. Well, we have to do this. Divide 2,400 by 25, right? Divide both sides by 25. Works out to be 96. So to answer the question, if this person got 96% on his exam based on the weighting system that we used, his mark would go from what it was before up to 90%. All right. So 96% on the exam gives him that 90% that he wants, or at least 90%. Of course, if he got anything higher than 96, it would be more than 90%. So 96% is the mark that he needs to aim for to bring that mark up to 86 based on the weighting system that we have. Now, if the weighting system was different, this calculation would be different. I just want to be clear on that. All right. So that is what I wanted to go through with you today. I'm just going to briefly talk about the homework question. So you need to get a score of 90, just putting a statement. You need to get a score of 96% to make 90% in the class. I'm going to give you a histogram like this with some weights this time. I think I gave you shoe sizes the last time. And ask for the mean, mode, and median for this histogram. I'll put this on the Teacher Ease account later on. So if you just follow the video and see what we did, you should be able to do this and find what the mean is, the mode is, and the medium weight for the above histogram. The next question you're going to get is one like this, where the same weighting systems that we just talked about for these two people. And I'm going to give you the grades that this person did in Mrs. Ettersid's class. Homework is that, class participation is that, the test grades are that, and ask you what final exam mark do they need to make 70% in this class, right? That's what I'm going to be asking you to do on homework. So again, if you follow through what we did in the class, you should be okay with that. All right. So let me stop this now.